So we are now 3 weeks away from Stellar Blade releasing, and we recently had a demo drop that's about an hour in length, and I've played through that demo twice now, and after observing the discourse around this game, I thought I would try to do something a bit different that it's just not very common currently, and that's talk about the game itself, as most of the discourse online has been for the character model of Eve in the game. And I just feel like there's so much more to discuss here than just that. So I figured we'd take a shot at it here today. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you're new. So first thing, the game itself takes place with Earth having fallen to these alien invaders called the Natiba. And early on in the game, which is where the demo pretty much is just like the start of the game, you drop in as Eve, and she has a bunch of allies with her. And it seems like you're basically making a big push to try to knock off all these different Natibas. But of course, things go wrong, and you end up running into Adam. So you have Adam and Eve, and then it seems like they're really setting off on their adventure against the Natiba. So again, this is kind of just the start of things, and mostly it's here, this demo, to showcase the different elements of the game with gameplay, progression, visuals, weapons, that sort of thing. So it just at least sets you up, gets your feet wet a bit, and figure out if you're going to enjoy the gameplay here or not. Again, a lot of the discourse has been around the character model for Eve and her exaggerated figure and parts, if you will. This character is based on an actual person. Like they do the body scans and that sort of thing. That's not new necessarily. It's something that's common in a lot of sports games where they will just get people in there, the different players, and they'll get images of them all around. Or if you see any likenesses in different games, like Death Stranding, for example, or they even put Conan O'Brien in it, they'll have all these cameras around you, this photogrammetry, and they'll get a bunch of pictures and just have the model set up for it. But Eve has definitely caused a lot of discussion online, it's kind of weird to me because I feel like we've seen this over and over and over again, and maybe it's just because I'm a bit older and remember really when we went to, I would even say, while we of course had the PS1 with like Lara Croft, really when we went to the PS2 and 360 generation, that's when it started to stick out a bit more because you had more polygons and you could do a lot more in terms of details. And we've just had so many characters, and people have pointed this out online with Lara Croft, Bayonetta, Nier Automata, that 2B, that was a big one. You can even look at Rain in Blood Rain as being a big one there to put alongside of them. You can look at half the Dead or Alive roster and see what we were all dealing with growing up. The best is when I'd watch like a 12 or 13-year-old come up to the register back at the old stores and try to convince their mom or dad that they were really interested in volleyball. All of a sudden, that's why they need this brand new Dead or Alive game. The idea of having a female main character who is exaggerated, it's not new. So it's very strange to me that this has become such a heated debate and topic. I just feel like most people were almost used to seeing something like this in what is really an over-the-top anime sci-fi inspired game like this. To me, it actually seems to fit in perfectly fine, but there's a lot of dramatic takes online either way, really, whether people are swinging the camera angles around and other people just lambasting them for it. It's a conversation that's worn its welcome at this point. The game itself is something that I actually really enjoyed. So there are different modes in this game, visually speaking. Okay, and that I have like balance. There's one that's more for about frame rate, even further than balance. There's one that's all about fidelity. I just stuck with balanced. There were some frame drops in there, but nothing substantial or that threw me off or I felt like got me killed at any time in the game. It is targeting 60 FPS, and that feels almost required for a title like this, that if you had to compare it to something, you could look around and say, okay, this is similar to, I've seen Souls-like. I don't think so. It's more of a hack and slash type game. So I would place it alongside of like a Nier or a Devil May Cry personally. But the combat, when I first saw it, I was expecting it to be incredibly fast based on what they were showing. And a lot of that, I think, was mostly the camera angles changing very quickly during combat. But the combat's slower. At least it feels slower when you're first playing it. And a lot of that has to do with the movements being much more purposeful, specifically your attacks, because they do take a little longer to do. So you're not like swinging like incredibly fast necessarily in your combos. And your character isn't necessarily airborne completely and zapping all over the place from different angles. You're drawn much closer to the action. So because of that, when I was first playing it, I said, man, this does feel slower. But then I started to realize one of the key elements to the game is the parrying and the dodging. Much more so, I think, the parrying. While you do have a perfect dodge that you can build on and actually increase the timing window for it, I noticed that the parry and the block is instant to interrupt your attacks. So if you attack and you notice that the enemy is about to then attack you, you're not stuck in your animation. You can hit block, which is the L1, and you'll immediately go to it. You'll cancel out of your attack. And because of that, the game just encourages you to be up close and personal with these enemies constantly. You really don't have to back off much if you have the timing down for the blocking. And when you do catch a perfect parry, you get this orange spark and a nice little touch. The speaker on the DualSense controller makes a noise, like a clang noise. So it does feel like there's a lot of impact there when you time it just right. It's very, very satisfying. And the perfect dodge, I had less luck with the perfect dodge is what I'll say. It was less effective for me than doing the parrying and just kind of setting up that with attacks along with counterattacks. And you also get an ability called Blink, which if you catch them in sort of this blue animation that I believe would grab you or do a lot of damage, you can watch your sword, and when that blinks and then you hit circle, you'll dodge behind them, which then sets you up for a nice sort of combo. And then you also have these special abilities that are called beta moves, and they're basically combos that are already predetermined with sort of this extra damage boost from energy on your sword. And it's because of the instant blocking that leads to parrying that I was able to really get the hang of this. And once you do, it is an awesome experience with the combat, to where like, the boss that they have in this demo, eventually I was making quick work of that boss. There was no problem at all. I never had to really back off from it. I was there right in its face, just completely destroying it, parry, combo, attack, and it fell rapidly. So I feel like it is going to be that sense of learn the enemy's movements and then counter them with the correct timing, and then also look out for certain things. So there is that idea of learning your enemy maybe over time, as I feel like there will be enemies that just probably kill you easily. And there was that sense at times where you're just in trouble and you just can't get the timing right the first time and you're probably going to die, but you come back even stronger. You don't lose your experience. So that aspect is not Souls related. The thing that seems to be tripping people up with this one, it's not even the combat. It's that the fact that when you rest, enemies come back. And now, of course, we still link that to a Souls game. And it's unfortunate because that's not how I would look at this. And if people believe that this is a Souls game, yeah, they might just go ahead and pass on it, even though, again, it's more like a hack and slash sort of title. You do have these different camps that you can activate, and they're rest points, but you also have shops. You can upgrade your weapons, which you have a sword that you sort of keep in your hair, which is a fun touch. But you do have a skill tree that you can also upgrade. In fact, there are multiple ones. A few of them are still locked at this time, but the ones that are there do seem like extremely beneficial. There are a few skills that will, for example, widen the window for perfect dodges and perfect parries, which when you first start, there's some getting used to with that timing. It seems like this would, of course, just work to help with some of that timing you may have an issue with. And then they have counter attacks all over the place. They do buff just your basic attacks as well as your beta attacks. And again, there are a few that aren't even open yet, which I think is probably going to be for additional weapons or maybe core abilities that you get later on in the game. There are outfits that you can change out, and I really didn't get into any of that with the demo. Mostly I was jumping into the demo to see how the combat was with the gameplay, and I'll probably check out some of the different outfits or unlockables in the full game. But they have talked about having a ton of different variety for how you want Eve to look in the game, so that that's at least really cool. People like to customize their character. The thing I wasn't a huge fan of was the platforming. It feels very out of place, and for the most part, it's, at least in the demo, it was kind of swinging between these poles, and it just did not, I think, mesh well with the rest of the game itself. It felt very clunky, and none of it was confident at all to do. So I understand why they want to have it, because they've already shown that they're going to have branching paths in sort of the exploration aspect. And yeah, a lot of that's going to be based on the platforming. So we'll see how it goes, and if they try to do anything too crazy with it. There was a part where there was water and you had to push the planks up to the ladder, and I'm kind of envisioning them trying to do some other weird stuff that might feel a bit janky in practice. But hey, if they can keep that combat steady and add more to it, it'll be one of those situations where the good will outweigh the bad. I did talk a bit about the story early on, and my only issue right now is I don't feel very attached in any way to Eve. So I think that has been a criticism that's come up from others, but they're just, the backstory isn't there yet. And what I noticed is when I would rest at some of these different campsites, there would be flashbacks. And I feel like that's one of the ways they can kind of spin the narrative to make you be more familiar with Eve, maybe have some more empathy with her as a character, and just sort of build her up from there. And the demo being an hour, maybe 45 minutes if you're pretty good at it, it's just not going to be enough time to really get to know her. So that's why I'm holding off or reserving judgment for just the main story itself and Eve as a character until the full game comes out and they have more time to sort of flesh out the different characters and explain exactly what's going on in that world. But just based on this small slice with the demo, I'm pretty happy with what I've seen here so far, and I am looking forward to the full release later on this month. Now, the developers at Shift Up have already discussed microtransactions, saying there just will not be any in this game unless they do collaborations with like third-party game or other games, really, other intellectual properties where it would cost money in order to have, say, an outfit for Eve added in, and then they would approach it in that way. But the base game, with everything that's already been figured out, no microtransactions. So the best compliment I can give this game, and I'm sure for some people, maybe a bit younger, this isn't going to be, it's not going to sound like a compliment. It is, trust me. This sort of feels like a game that I would get complete back on the late PS2, like first half PS3 days. That's, again, it's a compliment, trust me. But let me know what you think about Stellar Blade so far, if you had a chance to check out the demo. Are you picking it up later on this month? And what'd you think of the gameplay? And sure, even the discourse around Eve's character model. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.